Internet, the Psychologist Casual Review, and today we're going to be reviewing The Dread of Woman, a short article written by Karen Horney that is very interesting in many regards because it deconstructs a lot of psychoanalytic a priori's, or at least Freudian a priori's, that are still taught today. So I found it very interesting from that perspective, and it enriches us in an intellectual way on trying to further our understanding of what causes men to be terrified by women. So Horney starts the article with poems, which is always a great opening, right? And it's poems about how men can lose themselves at sea. One is about a whirlpool, and the other is about the sea proper. And in both poems, there's this idea of being sunk in something, being absorbed. And this absorption, this dread of being absorbed, is going to be the underpinning of Karen Horney's definition of the dread. The dread is this deep feeling that men have of feeling lost within a woman, being in a way absorbed by her, be it by her seductiveness, by her enchantment. She also goes on to talk about religion and myths, for example, talking about Odysseus, and he's been enchanted by the sirens. And she always says that men have never lacked creativity when it comes to their dread of women and how women can, in a way, destroy them. Which is something that I feel still is very, very true, as there is this still a massive fear on behalf of men of women. So why is that so? So for Horney, this dread comes from early infantile experience, mainly the one of the male child. So contrary to what Freud says, because for Freud the dread of woman is linked to castration anxiety, i.e. the father's going to prevent the child from having the mother, is going to separate the mother and child and say that mother is his. Very simply, very fundamentally. There's a lot of nuance, but it's for you to get the idea. For Horney, however, this is not exactly what happens. What happens is that fundamentally, at the very start of life, the child is dependent upon his mother, even more so when Horney talked about it. It was even more gender-based, right? The mother was the one taking care of the child. So what happens is that fundamentally the child grows dependent upon mother. So mother is responsible for taking care, but also for punishing. This is going to be very important. As for Horney, as the child develops, there are stages where he's going to exert a form of sadism, or at least attacks on mother's body, being by biting the breast, by kicking mother, and so on and so forth. So the first form of limitations, and if things go poorly, retribution, will be because of mother. All right? This is very important for you to understand, because for Horney, it all triggers down from that, because the first experience that the child has of being confronted to a limit or the punishment is mother. It's not father. Therefore, the child is going to internalize it very, very early on. Afterwards, what's going to happen is that the child is going to develop interest in gender differences, i.e. people who have penises and people who have vaginas. And contrary to what Freud states, that, for example, there's going to be a denial, what happens is that little boys are going to realize that fundamentally they cannot provide mother with satisfaction, that they are not mother's world in a way, that mother has a life outside of them. This insult to their narcissism, and when I mean insult, it's not a verbal insult, of course, but it's like realizing that mother has better things to do than be 24/7 with a child, right? So that realization is going to cause the child to, in a way, feel wounded on a narcissistic level, meaning that his developing ego is not going to like that, because he has known mother to always be at his care, and seeing mother detach is going to be something that he feels resentful for. Therefore, that resentment is not going to go down well. That resentment is going to be, in a way, carried over throughout the years in an unconscious way. Because what happens is that because mother is different, and the child realizes that on biological level, mother is different, therefore mother will never ever be like the child, and the child will never be able to ever bring what mother needs. Therefore, there is a moment where separation is going to occur, and that separation, if it's done, let's say, normally, will give a certain form of dread, like I can never satisfy her, therefore it's always going to be dangerous to even try. And if it goes in very poorly, and might even go to this point of like, oh, I'm not wounded, all right? I have no problem. It's the fault of women if they have a problem, not mine. And therefore that's not mine, being that perspective of a lot of men, that they in a way prefer to safeguard their narcissism rather than admit to limitations or faults, mean that they cannot invest the relationship with a woman in a positive way, meaning that there will always be conflicts and debasement. Because what is happening is that fundamentally, because they're so afraid of the genital difference and the non-satisfaction that is linked to it, that they can only push down women to reassure themselves in a way that fellow-centricity that Freud is on about for Horney is only secondary. It's secondary because they've been wounded by this fact that they are not like mother, and that mother has a life outside of them. That wound is so profound, so deep, that they resent women for it. And then the narcissism comes back to their own perspective, i.e., I am superior because I have a phallus, which is in a way, defense mechanism. In a very modern language, you would say it's a coping mechanism, right? Where men are coping with the fact that they are wounded. And therefore that cope can be seen through debasement of women. That it's a formation réactionnelle, as you would say in French, or reactionary formation, that it's not I am hurt, it's the other ones that are lacking. So that would be a very interesting take on Freud's perspective, that in a way castration is very secondary. That wound is also, and Karen Horney explains this very interestingly enough, is also reinforced by, for example, menstruation, i.e. when women bleed and the child sees it. There is something like, oh, it's dangerous because there's blood coming out of the vagina, therefore there's something of like, it could be destroyed by the same process. And she also goes into the fact that the child inherently wants to attack mother's body. So she quotes Melanie Klein, but does not engage in Kleinian analysis, which is a bit of a shame, because it would have been really interesting to see Horney's perspective on Melanie Klein, but she just like mentions Klein in a footnote. But here there is something of the same idea, is that mother's body is in a way heralded as something sacred, but as it is attacked, there is also the fear that there might be retribution. Therefore, mother is all caring, all powerful, but all destructive at the same time, therefore creating a massive sense of anxiety within the male child. So how does the male child cope with this? Well, unfortunately, what happens is that the male child might engage in debasement of women, or feel that women are inherently inferior because of all those wounds that were done to his self-esteem, and because he wanted in a way to combine with mother, to become one again with mother. But that's not going to happen, and therefore that profound wound is expressed with the fact that women are enticing, women are absorbing, women are needy, etc., etc. All of these are projections of male desire, very plainly. And so one of the main issues that are going to arise of all of this is that in a very interesting turn of events, men that depreciate women fear them, they dread them. And often men that don't depreciate women also have, in a way, or a normal form of anxiety towards them, or overcome their anxiety, their form of dread, and perhaps also have integrated fantasies of also being able to rekindle the oneness with mother, that the oneness has never gone. Here I'm going a little further than Karen Horney, like I'm trying to complete the picture. So please note that everything that's going to come from now on is more my understanding and my extension, all right? So it's not in the text, but I think this idea of oneness with mother is very interesting because I think that it's at the cause of many fantasies. And I do agree that when that oneness cannot be achieved, it causes a wound in the individual, a form of pain that the individual is not going to necessarily verbalize, but they're going to integrate. And I think there's two paths. There's the path of trying to reunite with the oneness, of trying to show gratitude, love, and care, which would open up to the oneness, or feeling that the oneness is so lost that there can only be debasement, hatred, and bitterness at having lost this feeling of oneness that is gone. And I think that Horney, even though she does not go that far, implies it through this text, and that the dread of woman is the dread of the biological difference between man and woman, and that Freud has missed the point in a way by positioning the phallus as like that, I can say, that supremacy, when in a way I do think Karen Horney was onto something when she seems that it's secondary to the fact of being wounded. And she even spins the Freudian twist to the end by saying that girls might have the same type of anxieties in regards to mother's body, however they feel that they are intact, whereas because they can identify with mother, whereas boys can't. So therefore there's a separation, and boys are not, in a way, integral. Which, if you know Freudian theory, you know it's kind of a spin on it, because normally it's girls feel that they're not complete, not whole, whereas boys feel that they're whole. So very interesting, and one can see the Karen Horney's creativity in this text as she kind of inverts the positions, but very well done, very interesting. I would also add that fundamentally, a lot of men, and that's where she tries to conclude the text, she says that a lot of men just basically want to protect their manhood and feel that, in a way, their obsession for their penises becomes so absolute that they spend a lot of time comparing sizes. And that was also very funny to read, because for her, that comparing sizes is like, how much am I a man? How much am I able to rival mother by the size of my organ, right? And it's very interesting because it's a symptom that's still very common, that men overemphasize the size of their junk, which in a way is still very relevant. And she links it up with how, on a power scale, how much can the child having become an adult, can compare to mother. But by doing so, we can see that men are not comfortable with it, because they feel that it's always missing. It's never big enough or long enough, right? So there's something that's not at peace, because at the very core there is a dread of women and of their supposed power or supposed almightiness that's there. So it's on the whole very interesting that men will prefer to preserve their manhood and the sense of self and esteem by debasing women, and also, and she ends the text on that, by loving and being with women that, how can I say, are infantile, because by doing so they try and justify the fact that women are inferior. So they pick the women in a way that justify their own vision. So that's very interesting. So that would put men that are, how can I say, that are categorically misogynists in a position of responsibility, that they are responsible themselves because of their dread and because they don't want to come to terms with the dread that they feel towards a woman. They repress it and then they choose women that can unconsciously confirm their hypothesis. It's a very interesting point to conclude on, and I feel that there is a lot to be gained in this text. The only shortcomings I felt is that Karen Horney doesn't go far enough. She quotes Klein, and I think that a merging of both theories could have been incredible, really to understand men's dread. Because I also think that Klein brings in the in utero approach that women can carry life, which Karen Horney does talk about, but often she doesn't, I feel, go far enough for psychoanalysis. She stays in this grey area. So she poses a lot of good bases that we can build upon, but she doesn't necessarily go far enough, at least not in this article and according to me. Please keep that in mind. So I hope you found this video interesting, and if you have any comments, please feel free to put them down. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.